Good evening, everybody. The radical dim, zany, oft-times bizarre virtual convention is heading into a third round this evening. The Dems fumbling their way through a virtual cacophony of bizarre speeches, strange videos, and otherworldly songs. Some of the biggest names to speak so far have even failed to mention Joe Biden or his choice for vice president, Kamala Harris. The Dems' clear lack of enthusiasm for Biden is clear for all to see, brought into the spotlight by socialist starlet Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Within just 60 seconds, that was what she was allotted, the Congresswoman disavowed capitalism and endorsed not Joe Biden, but Bernie Sanders.
The unsustainable brutality of an economy that rewards explosive inequalities of wealth for the few at the expense of long-term stability for the many. I hereby second the nomination of Senator Bernard Sanders of Vermont for President of the United States of America.
Bernie Sanders, who knew? Convention and party leaders have also been scrambling to explain some perplexing exclusions and inclusions in large virtual forums. For example, Elizabeth Warren making it into a Native American caucus discussion yesterday without any notes of irony. A curious spot, though, for someone who is just 1/1024th Native American. And the Biden convention thinking so highly of radical anti-Semite Linda Sarsour that she was featured as part of a meeting of Muslim delegates and allies. Biden's campaign today trying to, in some way, distance itself from Sarsour. But this is Biden's convention, and this is the Democratic Party of hate and what it stands for. Those blunders pale in comparison to the awkwardness exhibited by Joe Biden himself. He appeared somewhat stunned after being announced as the party's official nominee. And just listen to how China Joe acted after his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, gave last night's keynote address.
Hey, everyone. I'm Jill Biden's husband. As you heard tonight, excuse me, that's the kind of first lady this Jill Biden will be.
A little awkwardness there, a little embarrassment perhaps, playing out at the end of the night with strange musical performances like this one from musician Billy Porter. No singing tonight. The speakers will only speak. The failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton will be among them, as will be the vice president choice of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and former President Barack Obama, the featured speaker, we're sure. Obama will have to work hard on enthusiasm levels. According to the New York Times, Mark Leibovich, Obama has been known to speak about Biden with what he called a, quote, patronizing overfondness, as if the VP were the beloved family dog that kept peeing on the carpet, end quote from the New York Times. The radical Dems have done very little to help themselves during this virtual convention. In fact, President Trump appears to be the only one benefiting from their days so far. A week ago, Joe Biden led the president by 6 points in the Rasmussen poll. Today, that lead is 4 points. President Trump today expressing his frustration with Senate Majority Mitch McConnell. He's demanding to know why Republicans are permitting Democrats to hold hearings on the post office this week and next. The president tweeted this: why are Republicans allowing the Democrats to have ridiculous post office hearings on Saturday and Monday just before and during our convention? Let them hold them now during their convention or after our convention is over. Always playing right into their hands at Senate Majority Leader. And yes, Mitch McConnell has not played an artful game at all. and he has played more than a few double games. Joining us now is Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the New York Post, Fox Business contributor, Michael Goodwin, who has covered more than a few conventions in his distinguished career. And joining us as well, well, I guess it's going to be you and me. Michael, how are you?
I'm fine, Lou. Thank you.
Well, let's turn to the convention so far. It has had some of the most difficult moments I've seen in any convention since, say, 1968. Your thoughts?
Well, to me, there are several main themes to watch. And when we were together on Monday, I said I would be surprised, I would be shocked if anybody called out the riots, the violence in the cities, the Democratic-run cities, the crime wave, the murder wave. And so far, 2 nights down, there's been no mention of it. There's been lots of laudatory remarks about protesters and the demonstrators and the resistance, but nothing, not a word about the violence, about the murder rate going up. This is supposed to be, a convention that talks about particularly urban people at risk with jobs and disease and things like that. But they're actually being murdered at enormously high rates this year, and the Democrats are not interested in it. And then the second thing, as you mentioned with Joe Biden, this idea that he is diminished becomes more and more apparent, even with these very restricted appearances that he's making at the convention. I mean, that little moment where the balloons fell from the ceiling when he officially got the total, he just looked like he didn't quite know where he was. And so I think, it's clear that his handlers are going out of their way to keep him hidden. No interviews, anything like that. And they're trying to foist on the public a man who seems incapable of even sometimes knowing where he is. I mean, this is quite scandalous.
It is, and I want to bring in our good friend and colleague, Ed Rollins, the savant himself. He is joining us now. And Ed, good to have you with us. This Democrat convention, Michael and I are just talking about how ultimately, I guess it is just a peculiar presentation. And I know that these are the most difficult of times, but your thoughts on what you're witnessing and how are they measuring up to the environment?
Well, it's a very dull, boring show, and the viewers are not watching it. The whole message, which Michael so articulated in his column this morning, I don't like Trump. We'll do better, period. Without any explanation, without any basically, the whole idea of the virtual. This is supposed to be the high-tech guys. These are the Democrats that own Hollywood, and it's a really terrible, terrible show. And my sense is it's going to get more and more boring. I mean, tonight obviously they have Harris on and Obama, but it's been a very dull show. There's no presentation. There's no significance to what they're arguing other than they don't like Trump. A lot of us didn't like Obama. A lot of us didn't like Clinton.
Well, usually the other side doesn't like the other side, I think is the way it works. But
we're in the midst of crises. There's not a word about the crisis in the streets, not a word about the chaos that's going on. There's no solutions being offered for the virus that we're suffering with across the country. Their old economic plan we know doesn't work. So my sense is they're not getting much out of this thing, and the country's not getting much out of it. So.
Well, and the country's not watching either. This is terrible. These are terrible ratings, even by Hillary Clinton's standards in 2016, off the first night. It's been a disaster in every way, but it is wartime footing, and we've got to give some allowances for the environment. We are in a national crisis. We have a deadly virus pandemic raging through parts of the country. We are also without question, emerging from a deep recession and doing so probably, it looks as though now, at a historic rate in recovery. from the sell-offs and the markets, no question about it. We watched the markets today give back a few points of what is a record high for the NASDAQ, the S&P, the economy, generating jobs faster than I think even the most optimistic of us would have imagined. Your thoughts, Michael, on what the Democrats can do with that environment, because they're flailing now.
Right. Well, I think they're obviously doing everything they can to keep the economy shut down, to keep schools shut down. It's another one of these things, Lou, that's just remarkably polarizing, that to open schools becomes simply a blue-red divide. To go back to work becomes a blue-red divide. Look, I think we will get unemployment numbers. September will be the last ones before November 3rd. And so I think that if the unemployment rate keeps falling at the record rate that it's been falling the last few months, then I think the president will be in good shape on the economy. If the unemployment rate is down in the 8s somewhere, I think that would be a remarkable turnaround and a good sign that better things are coming. And therefore, I think that would really boost his chances in November.
Your thoughts about how rapidly the polls are closing, Ed, and how strong the president is looking, because there's no question he is gaining momentum. And the Democrats, despite being in convention, despite having their nominee, despite having his choice for vice president, this is not providing a boost to him at all. And if not now, when? For the Democrats.
I don't think they're going to get a boost. I think they were at their high point before, and I think the president's closing fast on them. And I think by the time he gets to his convention and offers his solutions, I also think they run a brilliant campaign. They haven't sit idly by. The president's been out there every day going to the key states. I like the idea of running it out of the White House. He won that White House. He gets to basically use it. And my sense is it'll be a much better show next week. And I would predict by the end of this thing, by the time we get to September, it's going to be very, very close, within 3 or 4 points.
Yeah, all this president has going for him is historic achievement. He is, without question, a historic president in terms of his successes and policy agenda and leadership. And although there is this matter that he can travel, thousands and thousands of miles in a week, while the Democratic nominee can't manage to get too far from his home basement. Ed Rollins, Michael Goodwin, as always, thanks for your insight. Good to see you, and hope to see you here, tomorrow evening. Up next, Goodyear gets political. What political messaging is okay for, PC corporations and frustrated employees? We take it up with Bob Woodson here next. And my new book, please pre-order yours, The Trump Century, How Our President Changed the Course of History Forever, available for pre-order. Get your copies at Amazon.com, thetrumpcentury.com, Barnes & Noble. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Breaking news now, former FBI lawyer Kevin Clinesmith today in federal court pleading guilty to one felony charge of making a false statement. Obama-appointed Judge James Boasberg accepted that plea and set Clinesmith's sentencing date for December 10th. Boasberg also serves as the presiding judge of the FISA court that Clinesmith defrauded, deceived. We're told Judge Boasberg was selected at random. If you believe that, that's fine. From the 13 other judges on the district court, quite a choice, though, to end up with the very fellow that runs the FISA court. Breaking news now. More than 200 people have been charged with federal crimes, more than 1,000 arrested in Operation Legend. Attorney General William Barr touted that 9-city effort, its mission to combat violent crime, including catching the killer of 4-year-old Legend Taliaferro, who the operation is named after. Barr blames radical left prosecutors and judges for not putting these violent criminals away.
We're going back to some of the old practices we followed in the 60s and 70s where there's revolving door justice and people are not being held. I think if you go to most of these big cities that are experiencing an increase in violent crime and you go to the police departments, they will know who the shooters are. They will know exactly who the shooters are, and there are not that many of them, relatively speaking. 200-300, that if you took off the streets, you would more than half violent crime.
Goodyear trying to walk back its discriminatory zero-tolerance policy. Diversity trainers at a Kansas plant said workers can wear clothing supporting some social and political causes like Black Lives Matter, but not Blue Lives Matter, and not MAGA is acceptable. Hours after that story broke, President Trump called for a complete boycott of Goodyear. And Goodyear had an extraordinary response. And see if you can stay up with this, because I want you to know I couldn't even begin to understand the HR speak and the blather that proceeded. The company saying the corporation had no role in diversity training, and, quote, it wholeheartedly supported both equality and law enforcement and will continue to do so. If that makes any sense to you, it sounds like what they're saying clearly is that Black Lives Matter will continue to be permitted, MAGA will not, and the president says boycott on. Joining us tonight is Bob Woodson, former civil rights activist. He headed the National Urban League Department of Criminal Justice for 5 years. He is the founder of the Woodson Center. It helps residents in low-income neighborhoods. Bob, great to see you. And I don't know what to say about corporate America right now. And what Goodyear did is ignorance to me in orders of magnitude beyond anything I would expect to come from an American corporation.
Well, my good friend, the late Michael Novak, was with the American Enterprise Institute with me, and he wrote a book called The Fire of Invention, when he talks about how American corporations are really tigers and lions in the marketplace and bleeping lambs in the social marketplace. And this is yet another example. The fact that Target and Nike would give millions of dollars to Black Lives Matters, but it didn't prevent those looters from going into Nike or Target stores and wiping them out. So corporate America continues to give these protesters the rope to hang themselves with. But Lou, it even gets worse than that. A young friend of mine is going through managerial training for a major store in a mall. And she was told that if a shoplifter comes in and is black, do not call mall security, let it go, because they don't want to be accused of being racist. Can you imagine that level of permissiveness and what that says to the country? Just crazy.
That is a terrible statement for all Americans. It is a terrible state for just a terrible element to even contemplate when you think that we are a nation of laws and we are not enforcing them, not in the streets of Portland, not in the streets of many of our Democrat-run largest cities, and now not in a mall because of the color of one's skin. It's ignorance, it is cowardice, it is debilitating and toxic. I just can't even imagine how we've gotten to this state. I look out there, Bob, and I look at everything that's going on across this country every day, every night, and I can't help but wonder how we got here and what in the world must all of the civil rights icons who did so much for African Americans, for black Americans, to see the violence, to see the ignorance, and to see corporate America behaving as if Marxists like Black Lives Matter had some sort of equivalency to say the Red Cross. It's madness that we are witnessing, and I don't know how to stop it. Do you?
Well, one thing, I was appalled at looking at the Democratic National Convention when speaker after speaker failed to mention the riots that are going on. They never mentioned the black-on-black murders that have become epidemic in our urban centers. And each one of them talked about systemic racism, that we must end systemic racism. And I think worst of all was Michelle Obama's statement when she said that that George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, a never-ending list of people of color that continue to be murdered. There are 4 blacks murdered, killed by police unarmed. And for every one of them, 270 by killed other blacks. And yet she falsely makes a statement that an endless list of people being murdered. All they do is contribute to add to the mayhem that is going on in our inner cities. The Washington Post did not print a single word in the last 4 days about the mayhem that's going on in Portland. But yet today they're preparing us for riots in Louisville, Kentucky, when the headline reads, 5 months after Taylor's death, Kentucky's largest city has become the epicenter of national movement of racial justice, weathering more than 80 days of protests, backed by professional athletes and A-list celebrities that have put pressure on the investigation. They're treating as if they're setting Louisville, Kentucky up to be another Portland. And yet the politicians meeting at the convention are silent on this. And also the question is, where are the civil rights leaders when Black Lives Matter has migrated from seeking justice for blacks to denigrating the black family, burning Bibles in Portland, tearing down the cross, desecrating the World War II memorial, putting a hammer and a sickle on it. Yet the people at the convention continue to mention support for Black Lives Matter. Well, I just think
as if they are heroes. Bob, we've got to go to a quick commercial. We're going to come right back more with Bob Woodson. Stay with us. Can't wait for the other side of these commercials. Watch these commercials, enjoy them. But Bob Woodson and I will be right back. Please stay with us. We're back with Bob Woodson, and one of the things today is a tweet from the president. Bob, I'd like to take up with you. If we could show the audience this tweet from the president on the Goodyear fiasco. The president saying, "Don't buy Goodyear tires. They announced a ban on MAGA hats. Get better tires for far less." And then he said, "This is what the radical left Democrats do too, can play the same game, and we have to start playing it now." The boycott is on. Goodyear is, has some sort of silly, weak-kneed response here, but they don't disavow what has happened. They don't have a policy that they put up and say, here, there's still freedom of speech in this country. Your reaction to this?
Well, again, Goodyear just plays into this victim's narrative, too. The fact that hundreds of millions of dollars are being given these companies to Black Lives Matter. They don't ask what the money's being used for, but all it's doing is continuing to divide this nation, and it supports tribalism. Mm-hmm. And what I find most disgusting, instead of investing in institutions within the community that will solve the problem from within, they keep acting as if the problems that we're facing with black-on-black violence, for instance, can be, the solutions are external, Lou. They're internal.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do at the Woodson Center is to meet with some of these corporate leaders and give them an alternative to funding victimization by helping them to understand that the solutions to the problems that are plaguing particularly the black community, and as a consequence, this nation, can be found by going inside of those communities. Lou, I have been on the inside of the kind of mayhem that is going on around this country. I've had 3 members of my immediate family die as a result of violence in the inner city. A brother, 29, who left 5 children behind. I've also gone to the homes of mothers who have lost children as I have been involved in gang mediation. I've had to go into the homes the day after a son was killed. I've been to funerals of ex-gang members to try to give them a big hug at the funeral of their fallen friend. to discourage them from to retaliating. So I've been on that side. But going into those communities, you cannot say to them that somehow the solution to their problem is ending systemic racism, or somehow the statues that are being taken down, or Southern statues, are somehow a remedy for their problem. But I really think all these officials, the civil rights leaders, the Urban League, the NAACP, the Congressional Black Caucus, all of these people who are supposed to be supporters of racial justice for blacks, they need to be held accountable. They need to answer, where do they stand with Black Lives Matter when Black Lives Matter says that the nuclear family is Eurocentric and therefore no longer useful, that Bibles should be burned and crosses defaced. Where are they? Are they still supporting Black Lives Matter when they take these radical leftist positions? And I think they need to be called out.
They are. Well, you know what? We're going to make a practice of it, as you suggest. And we're also going to make a practice out of pointing out Bob Woodson is speaking as an American who wants to see more African Americans not become Marxist or see American corporations supporting Marxism, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever in this country. He wants to see more African American, more black millionaires, and have them minted by the hundreds, not by diverting resources to pushing nonprofit Marxist organizations. It's time to change the direction of this country, and Bob Woodson is at the forefront of leading that change. Bob, we thank you for being with us. Look forward to our next talk next week. Appreciate it. Bob Woodson is a great American, and I hope you enjoy listening to him as much as I do. Well, speaking of people I enjoy listening to, President Trump is scheduled to hold a briefing this hour on the China virus pandemic. We'll be taking you there when he enters the room. Up next, Red Storm rising. Is the United States doing enough to combat China's rising aggression? Sebastian Gorka with us next. My new book is The Trump Century, How Our President Changed the Course of History Forever. Please pre-order your copies at thetrumpcentury.com, amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com. We'll be right back. Stay with us, please. Breaking news now. A Los Angeles man today charged with voter fraud, casting a ballot for his dead mother 3 times. A ballot for his dead mother 3 times. Yes, you heard me correctly. The local prosecutor says 55-year-old Cesar Peter Abutin cast votes for himself and his dead mother between 2012 and 2014. She died in July of 2006. Abutin faces up to 3 years in prison. Our country's elite universities are bowing to China and its takeover of Hong Kong. This is an incredible story from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal reporting that they found universities, including Princeton University's Harvard Business School, University of Pennsylvania, are planning things like secret codes and anonymous online chats in an effort to shield Chinese students from discussion on politically sensitive topics about China. Doing this in the United States. The schools fear that some of their students might be prosecuted by Communist China under its new national security law, but not one of them that I'm aware of has said a word in protest of China's takeover of Hong Kong or its aggression around the globe. Joining us tonight is Sebastian Gorka, host of the Salem radio program America First, author and former strategist to President Trump. Seb, I don't know, when we have universities pulling this kind of nonsense, it really does make you wonder what we're in for.
Truly, truly stunning news. It's not bad enough, Lou, that we have faculty members, researchers being arrested at Ivy League institutions for how they're helping out Communist China. It's not bad enough that we have millions of dollars flooding into America to set up propaganda institutes, these so-called Confucian institutes across academe. Now they are kowtowing to a communist regime. What next when it comes to a history class? Are we going to see professors delete parts of communist Chinese history that the regime in Beijing might find embarrassing? The tens of millions killed in the name of Karl Marx and Mao Zedong? This is America. Universities are meant to educate based on the truth, based upon investigation. This is a true outrage.
It is indeed. And the idea of academic freedom. Think about this, Seb, just as a little brain test here. When's the last time you heard anyone from academia mention anything called academic freedom? Academic freedom. Can you think of the last time you heard it? Or watched a significant report on television or in a newspaper outlet or website? You just don't hear it because it isn't happening on our universities and our college campuses.
The sad truth is that these are no longer institutions of higher learning. Sadly, we conservatives have allowed them to become indoctrination mills for at least 2 generations. Let's recall what happened in 1968, 1969. The Weather Underground, people like Bernardine and Bill Ayers trying to effect a Marxist revolution in America with the Chicago Days of Rage and the SDS. They failed. But did they retire? Did they become poets? No. They became tenured professors in Chicago. They became high school teachers. And what did we do? Nothing. The delayed reaction of homeschooling was a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound. And now we've woken up to the fact the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, in its latest survey, Lou, found that 72% of American millennials would prefer to live in a socialist or communist America. That happened in our universities and high schools.
Yeah.
In our universities and high schools.
Yeah, those universities, those colleges, obviously dedicated more to indoctrination than education. And again, academic freedom is well, it's a banished word and expression as well as right, unfortunately. The Confucius Centers you mentioned earlier, 75 of them still on university campuses and some K through 12 schools. Why are we not simply dealing with it instead of giving them an order to divest? Why aren't we using the power of the federal government to remove them from universities and create significant consequences, and I mean right now, for continuing a support and partnership with those institutes that are nothing more than propaganda operations and bases of operation for surveillance and, most likely, espionage?
I'm making this my personal mission. On Friday, the president signed my confirmation as a presidential nominee to the National Security Education Board, Lou, and my primary mission is to make sure things like the Confucian Institutes get short shrift in America. This is a communist regime, the largest dictatorship in the world today. It has labor camps, it has forced organ transplants. Look at that video of the Uyghurs being blindfolded and put on those cattle trucks. The idea that we are seeing communist propaganda inveigle itself in our colleges has to stop, and I'm going to make it my mission to make sure that happens under Donald Trump's watch.
And your reaction to reports that the U.S. government is approving a doubling of routes between China and the United States from 4 to 8 during this moment of crisis, in this moment of rising tensions. Your thoughts?
I haven't seen the threat analysis that justified that expansion. All I know is that in January, the president made the right decision, but we have to think twice. As far as I'm concerned, America shouldn't be doing business with China, full stop. It is a dictatorship. We can live without them. We will survive. We will have better economic trade relations with other countries. As far as I'm concerned, China declared war on us years ago, and we have to win our trade war against them.
Any nation, any decent, civilized nation, after what President Xi Jinping unleashed on the world, would remove him from office and seek forgiveness and seek a new direction for the Republic of China. Nothing less will make it right, in my opinion. Seb Gorka, always great to have you here. Thanks so much. We are waiting for the president to address us. We will be bringing that to you as soon as he approaches the lectern there. Major.